The year was 1878, and Dahlia Evans's voice shattered like glass when she spoke, a result of the scarlet fever that had ravaged her throat 3 winters ago. As the stagecoach rumbled into the dusty town of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, she clutched her small leather satchel tighter, knowing that a new place meant the same old ridicule awaited her. The coach jerked to a stop, sending dust billowing around the wooden buildings that lined the main street. Dahlia adjusted her modest bluebonnet and smoothed the wrinkles from her traveling dress. She was 22 years old, alone in the world save for a distant aunt who had reluctantly offered her a position as a shopkeeper's assistant. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down. "Welcome to Copper Creek." Dahlia nodded her thanks, not daring to speak. She had learned that silence was often kinder than the stares that followed her broken speech. The driver helped her down, his expression softening at her obvious nervousness. "Aunt Martha's General Store is just down the street," he said, pointing. "Can't miss it." "Only store with the red painted door." Taking a deep breath, Dahlia gathered her courage and began walking. The main street bustled with activity. Cowboys lounged outside the saloon, shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and women in calico dresses hurried about their errands. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, trying to ignore the weight of curious glances. The red door of the general store appeared like a beacon. Dahlia paused outside, gathering her resolve before pushing it open. A bell tinkled overhead. "Be right there," called a voice from the back room. The store was neatly organized, shelves lined with everything from sacks of flour to bolts of fabric. Canned goods, tools, and sundries filled every available space. The scent of coffee, leather, and spices mingled in the air. A plump woman in her 50s emerged from behind a curtain, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray, streaked hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes narrowed as she spotted Dahlia. "You must be Martha's niece," she said. "Why, yes, madam," Dahlia replied, her voice catching and breaking on the words. "Dahlia Evans." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly at the sound of Dahlia's fractured voice, but she simply nodded. "I'm Beatrice Holcomb. Your aunt had to travel east for a family emergency. Left me in charge until she returns. You'll be staying in the room upstairs and working here in exchange for board." Thank you," Dahlia managed. Beatrice's expression softened slightly. "Let me show you upstairs. You can get settled, then come down and I'll explain your duties." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. A window overlooked the main street, allowing sunlight to pour in. It wasn't much, but it was more than Dahlia had hoped for. "Store opens at 7, Beatrice explained. "We close at 6, except Saturdays when we're open until 8. Sundays we're closed. Your job will be to keep the shelves stocked, assist customers, and help with inventory." Dahlia nodded, anxiety building at the thought of speaking to customers. How would they react to her voice? Would they mock her as so many had before? "One more thing," Beatrice said, pausing at the door. "Folks around here can be a bit set in their ways. Don't take it personal if they seem standoffish at first." After Beatrice left, Dahlia sat on the edge of the bed, trying to quiet her racing heart. She'd come to Copper Creek hoping for a new beginning, but the familiar dread still clung to her like a shadow. The next morning, Dahlia rose before dawn. She dressed carefully in a simple brown dress with a white collar, her trembling fingers fastening each button. By the time she descended the stairs, Beatrice was already brewing coffee. "Morning," Beatrice greeted her. "There's fresh bread and jam on the table." Dahlia nodded gratefully and sat down to eat, savoring each bite. The jam was sweeter than any she'd tasted before. "Made it myself," Beatrice said, noticing Dahlia's expression. "Wild strawberries from up in the hills." "It's wonderful," Dahlia replied, her voice cracking on the compliment. The morning passed in a flurry of activity as Beatrice showed Dahlia the ropes. She learned where everything was kept, how to measure fabric, weigh coffee beans, and wrap purchases. The fear of interacting with customers loomed large, but the first few were kind enough. seemingly not noticing or politely ignoring her stuttered replies. It was just before noon when the bell above the door rang and 3 young women entered. They were elegantly dressed, their elaborate hats adorned with ribbons and feathers. "Good morning, Mrs. Holcomb," the tallest one called. "We've come to see about fabric for new dresses." "The social season is upon us." "Morning, Miss Sullivan," Beatrice replied. "My assistant Dahlia will help you. I need to inventory the back room." Dahlia felt her mouth go dry as the women turned their attention to her. She forced a smile and approached them. "How may I help you?" she asked, her voice breaking and hitching on nearly every syllable. The women exchanged glances, their eyes widening. "What on earth is wrong with your voice?" the tallest one asked, not bothering to hide her disdain. Dahlia began, but was interrupted. "It sounds like a rusty gate," another woman said with a laugh, "or perhaps a dying crow." Heat rushed to Dahlia's cheeks as the women tittered. She swallowed hard and tried again. "The fabric is this way," she managed, turning toward the shelves. "I'm not sure I can understand a word she's saying," one whispered loudly. "Perhaps we should return when Mrs. Holcomb is available." Tears pricked at Dahlia's eyes as she heard the bell jingle, signaling their departure. She kept her back turned, trying to compose herself. "Pay them no mind," Beatrice said, emerging from the back room. "The Sullivan girls think their father's mining money makes them better than everyone else." Dahlia nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. It was happening again, just as it had in every town she'd ever lived in. The afternoon dragged on, each customer interaction a painful reminder of her difference. Some were kind, others openly curious, and a few were outright cruel. By closing time, Dahlia's nerves were frayed, and her throat ached from the effort of speaking. "You did well today," Beatrice said as they locked up. "First days are always the hardest." Dahlia managed a small smile, grateful for the woman's kindness but doubtful that things would improve. Experience had taught her that people rarely grew kinder with time. The next morning, Dahlia was arranging a display of canned goods when the bell above the door rang. She turned, plastering on a smile despite her apprehension. A tall man ducked through the doorway, removing his hat as he entered. Sunlight from the windows caught in his sandy hair, and dust covered his denim pants and worn leather boots. A cowboy, clearly, with broad shoulders and a lean frame hardened by outdoor work. "Morning," he called, nodding to Beatrice behind the counter. His voice was deep and carried a slight drawl. "Quinn Norton," Beatrice greeted him warmly. "Haven't seen you in town for weeks." "Been busy with the spring roundup at the Diamond Bee," he replied, his blue eyes scanning the store until they landed on Dahlia. "Don't believe we've met. You must be Martha's niece." Dahlia felt her heart sink. Another introduction, another chance for ridicule. She nodded, hoping to avoid speaking, but he approached with an outstretched hand. "Quinn Norton," he said. "I work as foreman at the Diamond Bee Ranch just outside of town." She had no choice but to respond. "Dahlia Evans," she said, her voice fracturing as it always did. She waited for the familiar flicker of surprise, followed by pity or mockery. Instead, Quinn simply smiled, his eyes warming. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Evans," he said, as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual at all. "I'm afraid I need quite a few supplies today. Been out on the range too long." He pulled a crumpled list from his pocket, and Dahlia found herself relaxing slightly as she helped him gather the items: coffee, sugar, flour, tobacco, ammunition, and several other necessities. He chatted easily as they moved through the store, telling her about the ranch and asking simple questions that she could answer with minimal speaking. When it came time to pay, Quinn leaned against the counter. "Been meaning to ask, Mrs. Holcomb. Is anyone taking care of Martha's garden while she's away? Those vegetables won't plant themselves." "I'm afraid not," Beatrice replied. "I've got my hands full here and my arthritis doesn't much care for gardening anyway." "I see could help," Dahlia offered before she could stop herself. "I used to garden with my mother," Quinn smiled. "Well, there you have it. I'd offer, but cattle don't give a man much time for growing things." As he gathered his purchases, Quinn tipped his hat to Dahlia. "Hope to see you around, Miss Evans. Town's livelier with a new face." After he left, Beatrice chuckled. "That boy's been the Diamond B foreman for 3 years now. Hard worker, that one. Started as a ranch hand when he was just 18, worked his way up." "He seems nice," Dahlia said carefully. "One of the good ones," Beatrice agreed. "Not like some of the riffraff that comes through town. His mother was a schoolteacher before she passed, so he's got more learning than most cowboys. Taught himself to play the piano, if you can believe it." The next few days fell into a pattern. Dahlia grew more comfortable with the store's operations, though customer interactions remained a challenge. The Sullivan sisters returned twice, each time making sure Dahlia heard their whispered mockery about her broken voice. On Saturday, Quinn returned to the store. This time he carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Morning, Miss Evans," he greeted her. "Brought you something." He handed her the package. "Seed packets from the ranch, thought they might be useful for Martha's garden." Dahlia carefully unwrapped the bundle, revealing half a dozen paper packets labeled in neat handwriting: tomatoes, beans, carrots, peas, radishes, and corn. Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. "This is very kind." "It's nothing," he replied with a shrug. Ranch manager's wife saves seeds every year, got plenty to spare. Before Dahlia could respond, the bell rang again and the Sullivan sisters entered. The tallest, Amelia, Dahlia had learned spotted Quinn and immediately brightened. "Why, Quinn Norton," she called, crossing the store with purpose. "What a pleasant surprise." Quinn nodded politely. "Miss Sullivan." "You simply must attend our spring social next weekend," Amelia continued, placing a gloved hand on his arm. "Father's invited all the prominent ranchers, and it wouldn't be the same without the Diamond be represented." "That's kind of you, but I'll be busy with ranch work," Quinn replied, gently removing her hand. Amelia pouted prettily. "Surely you can spare one evening. I've been practicing a new song on the piano that I'd love for you to hear." Quinn's eyes flicked briefly to Dahlia before returning to Amelia. "I'll see what I can do," he said noncommittally. Amelia beamed triumphantly, then noticed the seed packets in Dahlia's hands. "Oh, are you starting a garden? How quaint." Her tone made it clear she found nothing charming about the idea. "Though I suppose with that voice, talking to plants might be less embarrassing than talking to people." Dahlia flinched as though slapped, and Quinn's expression hardened. "Miss Evans's voice is just fine," he said, his tone suddenly cool. "And I find gardening to be a fine skill, more useful than playing the piano, certainly." Amelia's cheeks flushed pink. "I was only teasing," she said defensively. "No need to be so serious." "Some things aren't meant for teasing," Quinn replied firmly. He turned back to Dahlia. "I need to be going. Let me know if those seeds work out for you." After he left, Amelia stared at Dahlia with undisguised hostility. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she hissed, "but Quinn Norton is not interested in shop girls with broken voices." Dahlia said nothing, knowing any response would only give Amelia more ammunition. The silence seemed to infuriate Amelia more than any words could have, and she stormed out with her sisters trailing behind. That afternoon, Dahlia slipped away to examine her aunt's garden. It was overgrown but promising rich soil in raised beds, a small tool shed, and a good southern exposure. With work, it could be productive again. She was pulling weeds from one of the beds when a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she was startled to see Quinn standing there, hat in hand. "Sorry to intrude," he said. "Forgot some things at the store and Beatrice mentioned you were out here." "It's fine," Dahlia replied, self-conscious about her dirty hands and messy hair. Quinn surveyed the garden. "Good land here. Should grow just about anything." "I think so too," she agreed, standing and brushing soil from her apron. An awkward silence fell between them. Quinn shifted his weight, seemingly uncertain. "About what happened in the store," he finally said. "The Sullivan sisters can be difficult." "I'm used to it," Dahlia said softly. "You shouldn't have to be," Quinn replied, his voice unexpectedly fierce. "There's nothing wrong with the way you speak," Dahlia looked away, uncomfortable with his intensity. It's been this way since I was N19. Scarlet fever, Quinn nodded. My mother had a student once, voice affected the same way, smart as a whip that boy was. Went on to become a lawyer back east. She smiled slightly at that. People usually just wish IW wouldn't talk at all. Then they're fools, Quinn said simply. I'd listen to your voice until my dying day before I'd spend another minute hearing Amelia Sullivan prattle on about her piano playing. The statement was so unexpected and earnest that Dahlia laughed, a real laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. Quinn grinned in response, his eyes crinkling at the corners. There's a church social tomorrow after services, he said. Would you like to go, as friends, he added hastily. Might be a good way to meet some of the decent folk in town. Dahlia hesitated, fear warring with loneliness. I don't know if that's a good idea. Just think about it, Quinn suggested. I'll stop by the store in the morning case you change your mind. After he left, Dahlia sat on the garden bench, lost in thought. It had been so long since anyone had treated her normally, let alone defended her. But experience had taught her that people's kindness often had limits. How long before Quinn, too, grew tired of her halting speech. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling and weighing her options. Finally, she made a decision. She would go to the social not for Quinn, but for herself. She needed to know if Copper Creek could truly become home. The next morning, Dahlia put on her best dress, a sky blue cotton with small white flowers embroidered at the collar. She arranged her chestnut hair carefully, pinning it up in a style that flattered her heart-shaped face. When Quinn arrived at the store, his eyes widened appreciatively. You look lovely, Miss Evans. Thank you, she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. And please, call me Dahlia. Dahlia, he repeated, offering his arm. Shall we? The church was a simple white building with a tall steeple. Inside, wooden pews lined both sides of a central aisle. After the service, the congregation moved to a nearby clearing where tables had been set up with food and lemonade. Dahlia stayed close to Quinn, anxiety knotting her stomach as he introduced her to various townspeople. Some were clearly curious about her voice, but most were polite. Quinn's obvious acceptance of her seemed to influence others, and she found herself relaxing slightly as the afternoon wore on. They were enjoying slices of apple pie when Amelia Sullivan appeared, looking resplendent in a pink dress with matching parasol. Quinn, she called, waving. You came after all. This isn't your social, Amelia, Quinn pointed out. This is the church social. Amelia's smile faltered slightly. Well, yes, of course, but you did say you'd consider attending our gathering next weekend. I'm afraid I'll have to decline, Quinn replied. Got too much work at the ranch. Amelia's gaze shifted to Dahlia, narrowing slightly. I see you've brought Martha's niece. How charitable of you. Dahlia was kind enough to accompany me, Quinn corrected her. I consider myself fortunate. Before Amelia could respond, a commotion broke out near the lemonade table. A group of young boys had knocked over the pitcher, sending glass and lemonade everywhere. Amid the confusion, a small child began wailing he had stepped on a piece of broken glass. Without hesitation, Dahlia hurried over. The boy, no more than 5 or 6, sat on the ground clutching his foot as his mother hovered anxiously. Let me see, Dahlia said, kneeling beside him. In her concern, her voice came out clearer than usual. The boy's mother looked relieved. Do you know about doctoring? I can't tell how deep it is. Dahlia nodded. My father was a doctor. I helped him sometimes. She gently examined the child's foot. It's not too deep. Needs cleaning and bandaging. She worked efficiently, using her handkerchief to stanch the bleeding and instructing someone to bring clean water. The child's sobs subsided as she spoke to him soothingly, telling him a story about a brave rabbit to distract him from the pain. When she finished, the boy's mother clasped her hand gratefully. Thank you, Miss Evans. You've got a healer's touch. Dahlia smiled, warmed by the genuine appreciation. As she stood, she realized a small crowd had gathered watching her work. Among them was Quinn, whose expression held something that looked remarkably like admiration. "That was impressive," he said as they walked away. "You never mentioned your father was a doctor." "He died 3 years ago," Dahlia explained, "just after my illness." "I'm sorry," Quinn said softly. "You must miss him." "Every D-Day," she admitted. "He never made me feel broken." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. "You're not broken, Dahlia. Different maybe, but not broken." His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. In the weeks that followed, Quinn became a regular visitor to the store. He often brought small gifts, a wildflower bouquet, a book of poetry, fresh eggs from the ranch chickens. Each time, he engaged Dahlia in conversation, seeming genuinely interested in her thoughts and never showing impatience when she struggled with words. The garden flourished under her care, and she took pride in bringing fresh vegetables to Beatrice's kitchen. Even some of the townspeople began to warm to her, particularly after word spread about her medical knowledge. Occasionally, someone would stop by the store with a minor ailment, seeking her advice. Not everyone was kind, of course. The Sullivan sisters continued their campaign of whispered mockery, and some customers still requested Beatrice's assistance rather than deal with Dahlia. But for the first time since her illness, Dahlia felt a glimmer of belonging. One evening in late June, Quinn invited her for a buggy ride. The summer twilight stretched long, painting the landscape in gold and amber. As they drove beyond the town limits, Dahlia felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. Quinn guided the horses to a stop at the crest of a small hill overlooking a creek. The Diamond B Ranch was visible in the distance, its buildings nestled against the backdrop of mountains. "It's beautiful," Dahlia said, her voice soft with wonder. "Prettiest land in the territory," Quinn agreed, helping her down from the buggy. They spread a blanket on the grass, and Quinn produced a small picnic from behind the seat: bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a jar of Beatrice's strawberry jam. As they ate, Quinn told her stories about his childhood in Kansas, his journey west after his parents died, and his dreams for the future. Dahlia found herself sharing more about her own past, her father's medical practice, her mother's early death, and the loneliness that had followed her illness. "I've been thinking," she said as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I might stay in Copper Creek. Even after Aunt Martha returns." "I'm glad to hear it," Quinn replied, his voice warm. "The town needs someone with your skills and your kindness." "And my broken voice?" she asked, unable to keep a trace of bitterness from her tone. Quinn was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "The first time I heard you speak," he said slowly, "it reminded me of something. When I was a boy, there was a creek near our farm. Most of the time it ran smooth and clear. But there was one spot where it tumbled over rocks, breaking into a dozen different streams before coming back together. The sound it made was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, all those different notes playing together." He squeezed her hand. "Your voice is like that creek, Dahlia. It's not broken, it's just making music in its own way." Tears filled her eyes at his words. No one had ever described her voice as beautiful before, not since the fever. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Quinn's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then slowly he leaned forward. "May I?" he asked softly. Dahlia nodded, her heart racing. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When they parted, she saw in his eyes a reflection of her own feelings: wonder, joy, and the beginning of something deep and true. Summer bloomed into fall, and Dahlia's life in Copper Creek took on a rhythm she had never expected. Her aunt returned from the east and was delighted to find the store running smoothly and the garden flourishing. Martha Evans was a stern woman but fair, and she quickly recognized her niece's value to the business. Quinn courted Dahlia properly, taking her to church socials, town dances, and picnics by the creek. He taught her to ride, patiently guiding her until she felt comfortable on horseback. In return, She shared her knowledge of herbs and healing, teaching him which plants could ease pain or fight fever. Not everyone approved of their courtship. Amelia Sullivan made her disapproval known loudly and often, spreading rumors about Dahlia's background and suggesting that Quinn was only interested in her out of pity. The gossip stung, but Dahlia found herself better able to weather it with Quinn at her side. And as the townspeople came to know her, many began to see past her unusual speech to the person beneath. One crisp October afternoon, Dahlia was tending to a customer's sprained wrist when the store door burst open. A ranch hand staggered in, his face pale with urgency. "Miss Evans," he gasped, "it's Quinn. There's been an accident at the ranch. Horse threw him, he hit his head bad." Dahlia's heart stuttered in her chest. "Where is he?" she demanded, her fear momentarily overriding her stutter. "They've taken him to Doc Wilson's," the ranch hand replied. "But the doc's been drinking since noon. Barely makes sense." Without hesitation, Dahlia gathered her father's medical bag, one of the few possessions she'd brought with her to Copper Creek. "Take me to him," she ordered, her voice stronger than it had been in years. Doc Wilson's office was chaotic when they arrived. Quinn lay unconscious on an examination table, blood matting his hair. The doctor himself swayed on his feet, reeking of whiskey as he fumbled with bandages. "Step aside," Dahlia commanded, pushing past him. She examined Quinn quickly, her training taking over. The gash on his head was deep but clean. More concerning was his unresponsiveness and the uneven rhythm of his breathing. "He needs stitches," she announced, "and we must watch for brain swelling." "Now see here," Doc Wilson slurred. "I'm the doctor in this town." "And you're D-drunk," Dahlia replied sharply. "Either help me or get out of the way." To her surprise, the doctor's bleary eyes cleared slightly. He nodded and stepped back. "Tell me what you need." For the next hour, Dahlia worked steadily, cleaning and stitching Quinn's wound, checking his pupils and monitoring his breathing. The doctor, sobering somewhat, followed her instructions without argument. By evening, Quinn still hadn't regained consciousness. Dahlia refused to leave his side, keeping cool compresses on his forehead and speaking to him softly, telling him stories about her day, her plans for the garden, anything to fill the silence. The night stretched endlessly. Doc Wilson eventually succumbed to exhaustion, snoring in a chair in the corner. Dahlia maintained her vigil, fear gnawing at her insides. What if Quinn never woke? What if he did, but wasn't the same? Head injuries could change a person forever. She had seen it in her father's practice. As dawn broke, painting the room in pale golden light, Quinn's eyelids finally fluttered. Dahlia held her breath, watching as awareness slowly returned to his face. "Dahlia," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "What happened?" Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt lightheaded. "Your horse threw you," she explained, taking his hand. "You hit your head." Quinn winced as he tried to sit up. "Feels like it. Did you fix me up?" "She did more than that," Doc Wilson said from the doorway, looking haggard but sober. "She likely saved your life, boy." "I was in no condition to help." Quinn's eyes found Dahlia's, filled with gratitude and something deeper. "Thank you," he said simply. "UW would have done the same for me," she replied. "That's true," Quinn agreed, squeezing her hand, "but I'm not sure I would have done as good a job." "You've got a gift, Dahlia." 2 days later, Quinn was well enough to be moved to a room at the boarding house. Dahlia visited daily, bringing broth and bread from Beatrice's kitchen and reading to him from the newspaper. His recovery was steady, and within a week, he was able to take short walks through town with Dahlia at his side. It was during one such walk that they encountered Amelia Sullivan and her sisters outside the millinery shop. Amelia's eyes widened at the sight of Quinn's bandaged head. "My goodness," she exclaimed, hurrying over. "Quinn, we heard about your accident. How dreadful. Father said you were at death's door. Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated," Quinn replied dryly. "Thanks to Dahlia's medical skills, I'm nearly good as new." Amelia's gaze flickered to Dahlia, a calculating look in her eyes. How fortunate that a shopkeeper's assistant should have such unusual talents. My father was a doctor, Dahlia explained, holding her head high. I learned from him. Well, it's all very dramatic, Amelia said dismissively. But surely now that you're recovering, Quinn, you'll want proper medical attention. Father has offered to send for a specialist from Tucson. That won't be necessary, Quinn replied firmly. I trust Dahlia completely. Something in his tone made Amelia's smile falter. She studied them both, noting their linked arms and the protective way Quinn leaned toward Dahlia. I see, she said coolly. Well, I wish you a speedy recovery. With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, her sisters trailing behind like shadows. Quinn chuckled as they watched her go. I think Miss Sullivan has finally realized she's fighting a losing battle. What battle is that? Dahlia asked innocently. Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. Despite his injury, his eyes were clear and determined. The battle for my heart, he said softly. Though it was never much of a fight, it's belonged to you since the day you laughed in your aunt's garden. Dahlia's breath caught. Quinn, he took both her hands in his. I had a whole speech planned, he admitted. Was going to wait until I was fully recovered, take you somewhere special. But nearly dying has a way of making a man impatient. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. This was my mother's, he said, tipping a delicate gold ring with a small pearl into his palm. It's not fancy, but it's given with all the love in my heart. He lowered himself carefully to one knee, wincing slightly at the movement. Dahlia Evans, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't promise life will always be easy, but I swear I'll stand by you through whatever comes, and I'll listen to your beautiful voice until my dying day. Tears blurred Dahlia's vision as joy, unlike anything she'd ever known, welled up inside her. Yes, she said, her voice breaking not from damage but from emotion. Yes, I will marry you. Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her there in the middle of the street, heedless of who might see. They were married in the church the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills around Copper Creek. Aunt Martha gave Dahlia away, her usual stern expression softened with pride. Beatrice wept openly throughout the ceremony, and even Doc Wilson, newly sober thanks to Dahlia's influence, attended in his Sunday best. Quinn had been promoted to ranch manager by then, and they moved into a small house on the Diamond B property. Dahlia planted a garden even larger than her aunt's and began officially assisting Doc Wilson, using her medical knowledge to help the community that had, against all odds, become her home. In time, the townspeople grew so accustomed to her unique way of speaking that they scarcely noticed it anymore. Even the Sullivan sisters eventually stopped their mockery, particularly after Dahlia successfully delivered Amelia's first child during a blizzard when no one else could reach them. 5 years after their wedding, Dahlia stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Quinn teach their 3-year-old son to ride a gentle pony in the yard. Her free hand rested on her swollen belly, where their second child grew. Quinn looked up and caught her watching. He smiled, that same warm smile that had first made her believe happiness might be possible again. "Mama," their son called. "Look at me." "I see you, sweetheart," she called back, her voice breaking in its familiar way. "You're doing wonderfully." Quinn dismounted and lifted the boy down, then walked to the porch and wrapped his arm around Dahlia's waist. "Happy?" he asked softly. She leaned into his embrace, thinking of the long journey that had brought her here, the illness, the mockery, the loneliness, and finally, unexpectedly, the love. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied. And as the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant gold and crimson, Dahlia knew that her broken voice had led her to the most unbroken life she could imagine, one filled with purpose, acceptance, and a love that listened beyond the cracks to the music underneath.